Now, if Minecraft was real, it's fairly safe to say that we would be in quite a bit of danger, considering how monsters spawn outside when it gets dark, or even if it's too dark inside. Now, I'm going to treat this as if vanilla Minecraft were real, and if it was integrated into today's society, so we would still have our modern tech, except the rules of Minecraft's world would apply to ours. So while cities would be fairly safe at night thanks to all the lights, some residential neighborhoods and smaller towns would be overrun with monsters, including giant spiders and creepers, which wouldn't burn up in the morning. This would make the walk to school especially interesting. Not to mention that literally everywhere would have to keep the lights on like 24/7 to prevent monsters from spawning inside their establishment. This would mean either a lot of torches or a high hydro pill. So when you go to school, it would have had to keep the lights on at night, or you would have to do some fighting before you got to math class. Unless they have some form of security that would like handle the monsters in the morning before everyone got there, which I mean could be realistic, but I mean like teachers aren't paid enough, so would security guards who have to fight skeletons, zombies, giant spiders, and creepers be paid enough? I doubt it. There's also the issue of just totally different dimensions. Now, while we potentially wouldn't know about them, there is still the possibility of some people opening portals and unleashing Armageddon, since the most likely scenario would be us stumbling into the Nether absolutely blind, and then the forces of the Nether taking over our world, instead of the other way around. Sorry Fallen Kingdom fans, but Take Back the Night isn't as realistic as we had all hoped. Now, the end is also a different story. As we know, strongholds are long abandoned structures that hold unopened end portals, but how would this happen in our world? Probably in a similar fashion, only the structures and the portals would be discovered by archaeologists, and Indiana Jones movies would be about the eyes of Ender rather than crystal skulls. And if they knew how to open the portal would also be determined based on what we knew about this ancient civilization, and if we even understood how to make Ender eyes, and if we did somehow manage to get the portal open, whether it's through research or just sheer dumb luck, would we go through? And would we be able to survive the trip? Based on Earth's history, I think a whole other dimension to colonize would probably be a driving force behind why we would go through the portal. And well, we would end up stuck there until we kill the Ender Dragon, which is just something else entirely. Whether it would be possible and if we could do it is impossible to know, since the stupidity but also the brilliance of humans is astounding. But assuming we knew how to, like every Minecraft player basically knows how to defeat the Ender Dragon, we'd probably be alright. But not without a few casualties, I'm sure, since it's, you know, a freaking dragon, and there'd be no other dragons that we'd ever experienced other than the Ender Dragon. That's kinda nuts. However, advancing our civilization would be a breeze, since while yes, we don't have any advanced mods like Mechanism, we would still have caves full of ore to explore and mine, resulting in much more gold and diamonds than anyone ever thought possible, and much more easily, I'm guessing. I don't know, I'm not a miner, I'm over 18. And redstone would make for incredible advancements as well. Imagine Mumbo Jumbo but an IRL redstone technician, or Ilmango installing block swappers in your house, or equipping the entire world with netherite armor. Imagine enchantments and how they feel on our bodies, even though we would actually be superhumans. Yeah, you heard me right. If Minecraft was real, we would be superhumans. And that's no joke. The heaviest block in Minecraft is a gold block, since a 1 meter by 1 meter block of gold would weigh 19,300 kilograms, which is 42,549 pounds. And that's just one block. Multiply that by the 36 stacks Steve can carry, and Steve can easily hold 98,033,395.5 pounds, not including wearing any gold armor, which would only increase that weight. But even with a full inventory of gold blocks, Steve can still run at full speed, jump up 1 meter into the air, and do everything he could normally do, which is absolutely insane. And that's not even the max that he can carry, okay? That's before factoring in shulker boxes, which can be found in the end, and while they would be hella expensive, we could, in theory, carry 36 shulker boxes full of gold blocks, resulting in the insane weight of 1,200,614,400 kilograms. Or, for the 3 countries in the world that still use the imperial system, 2,000,000,000 646,901,666 pounds. That's insane. That number doesn't really mean much, so let me put it into terms that we can all relate to. Steve and Alex can both individually carry 108,537 school buses. That's 19,288 African bush elephants at their heaviest. That is, according to most moving companies, 16,543 houses at their heaviest, not including mansions or apartment buildings. That's insane! That is bonkers, absolutely bananas! That's also including Alex, whose character model has skinny arms, just like me. There would be no need for gyms, and it wouldn't matter that my arms are the size of ramen noodle packets because I would still be able to lift that. The only question is, when are we able to lift that? I mean, probably after puberty and not straight out of the womb, because that seems even unrealistic for Minecraft. And when looking at his strength, it seems kinda dumb how falling 7 meters will kill my overpowered ass, but okay. So, with this newfound power, how strong does that make the mobs? Cause zombies appear to just be undead versions of Steve, right? I mean, they wear the same shirt, pants, and shoes, so maybe a zombie would in theory be as strong as us, if not slightly weaker due to decay, because, they're undead. Same thing goes for the drowned, because they're just underwater zombies, as evidenced by their ability to be created by literally drowning a zombie. And while Endermen can only carry 1 block at a time from a specific set of blocks, they also have double our health. Creepers would just be like a walking bomb, just like they are in game, and skeletons could just one-shot any of us if we wander too far away from the streetlights. Hell, even if we're under streetlights and there's a forest right beside us. But all this doesn't even compare to the Nether, with monsters who can shoot fireballs that will either catch us on fire or just explode, mobs that attack us unless we're wearing gold, and skeletons that if they touched you, they slowly drain your life away. That's absolutely terrifying, okay? That's horrific. Not to mention skeletons riding on giant spiders, baby zombies riding on chickens, and how horrific would these bastards look in real life. That's horrifying to think about, especially the spiders, because again, we all know how I feel about spiders. I hate them. These things must be strong as hell too, for our overpowered One Punch Man fists to do only half a heart of damage every time. That would make me unable to sleep at night. I guess there's monsters nearby. Oh, and I'm not even gonna touch on the Wither, okay? Cause anyone who would summon that deserves the pain that the Wither would cause them, but it would also most likely wipe out our society. Oh, and the worst of all things, the inability to take a nap during the day. How am I supposed to function if I can't nap when I get home from work? Or nap at work? I mean, I didn't say that.
The latest installment of the franchise definitely caters to more interaction amongst players, and the dynamics of working together, surviving together, and fighting together go beyond what we've experienced as the lone hero in previous Fallout games. For starters, let's take a look at the game's setting. This time around, we're in West Virginia, only 20 years after the war ended, and the Fallout has settled. Compared to the environment in other Fallout games, locale is significantly more dangerous and unpredictable. If it were the real world, it seems very likely that 20 years may be treading on thin ice. Depending on how much of the area was affected by nuclear warfare, radiation would likely still be quite high, putting people at risk of becoming ill and dying before they even made any sort of contact with other people. But if they do come into contact with another survivor, chances are that that person may be severely affected by radiation as well. Who knows what could impact them psychologically, which potentially makes them dangerous to your well-being. Regardless, there would be a whole lot of hostility present. That being said, the wasteland can be a scary place. If you were to exit a vault and find another dweller who also recently left the safety of their vault, chances are you'd be able to make friends with them pretty fast, and also identify them thanks to their vault jumper. This background as a dweller could help foster bonds that turn into companionship and friendship, coming together with the goal of surviving, rebuilding, and having a buddy who has your back in the face of combat. Speaking of combat, fighting with friends would be easier in the real world too. I mean, you could tag team threats. Mutated animals that still look familiar would be running rampant all over the place, and that definitely would make your adventures out in the wasteland feel a lot more like a horror movie. And that's not something you want to experience alone. But let's talk about the most terrifying aspect of Fallout 76 that was revealed: the nuclear missile sites. What has been described as a dynamic game system for the new new title would absolutely be devastating in the real world. Sure, going around hunting down nuclear missile launch codes is a dandy old time when you're with your friends, and the possibility of crafting new alliances over them with other players in multiplayer mode is really cool. But if that were in real life, well, when you choose to strike an area on the map with your missile, the fallout would be atrocious, and go beyond just affecting one area. Not only does it potentially harm you in the long run, but it could also do a lot of damage to you psychologically. The threat of having unknown individuals who also share the wasteland with you potentially dropping a nuclear missile on you and your friends whenever their heart desires is really scary. That would breed a lot of paranoia, a lot of distrust, and ultimately threaten to harm your newly crafted society more than it would bring it together. There also wouldn't be much left in terms of rare or valuable resources. Those areas would be completely worthless. So overall, aside from serving some seriously overrated vengeance, launching nuclear missiles at one another in real life has more dire consequences than benefits. And I mean, that should be a given.
To answer this question, we first need to ask a question. What is the ink machine? The ink machine was installed by the cartoon studio's owner Joey Drew and the Ghent company to create living entities for the animation company. Wally Franks was the only person allowed to be the attendant to this machine. It's also the main plot device that's triggering many of the events because of the ink that flows through the machine. Basically, it's a giant machine that uses ink and human souls to make living versions of the Joey Drew Studios characters. But it didn't actually start out like this. Originally, the ink machine functioned like a 3D printer of sorts, where sketches would turn into real three-dimensional models and figures. However, somehow the machine gets enchanted or corrupted in some way, and changes to allow these cartoons to create living versions. These characters also have multiple variations, with some characters being made out of only ink, and others being infused with human souls. When infused with a soul, however, the ink machine may get a paper jam in a sense. Basically, those pure of heart, or those that have a genuine love for the characters, would turn into the perfect version of the character they most relate to, while those with impure intentions or any corrupt individuals would turn into evil versions of those characters. Basically, the ink machine acted as your partner's father that you're meeting for the first time, asking you what your intentions are, then judging you based on your answer. The evil versions of these characters, like Bendy and Alice Angel, turned into the antagonists of the game though, whereas the perfect versions like Mecha Boris and Perfect Alice turned into our allies, even if they were made completely out of ink. Now, without getting too deep into the story or lore of the games, what if this machine was real? How much damage would it cause? Unfortunately, there would probably be a lot of human sacrifice in this story, just because, well, that's kinda how these things go. The character would probably end up having a human soul. There would also need to be someone who was actively sacrificing these people to the machine, either in an effort to make an army or to promote their characters even more. And you know exactly who I'm thinking would do that? Oh hell yeah, it's Disney. Disney is just the kind of company that would sacrifice humans to an ink machine in an effort to promote or market themselves even more. The idea that they could fill their parks with actual living versions of their characters would be impossible for them to pass up. And honestly, I'd see why. Being the first place to have real versions of cartoon characters so many people grew up with would solidify their growing monopoly, and would in essence make them the world's biggest superpower more than they already are. Nobody would be talking about Jeff Bezos and his frickin' Dr. Evil style rocket, or the guy that paid $28 million to be on said rocket and then called in saying that he was busy that day. Like, nobody would care. We would be in awe of Disney and their real characters. As a kid, we think the characters we meet when we go to the parks are the real ones, but as we grow older, we grow out of that illusion. But this would suck even adults back to meet the real characters. People who as kids grew up watching Peter Pan meet the real flying Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell. Anyway, the ability to create these characters in real life is something that Disney would not pass up. The question is, how would they get the souls? They could just force the characters who already wear the suits into the machine, but this could result in evil versions of the characters, like an evil melting Cinderella, and that wouldn't be good for kids. So the best bet would probably be to have some form of job opening where you'd apply and then be given a questionnaire to fill out, followed by an interview, same with any other job, except instead they're turning you into a cartoon character instead of destroying your dreams. Well, I mean, I guess maybe it would be the same thing. Now, not everyone would obviously make the cut, but the issue still remains. What about the bad apples? Obviously, everyone is on their best behavior during an interview and even the first days or months of a job. So how can we tell the good nuts from those who would try to catch a squirrel from a chocolate factory? Well, time. If Disney wanted to minimize their chances of making an evil clone, at least if they knew about it, they would wait to see an employee's true colors before putting them through the machine. But then again, this is if they knew about the potential imperfections and if they knew what caused them, which is a big if, since we only have an idea about what causes it thanks to Matt Pat and his theories on the games, as well as Super Horror Bro. If it was real, Matt Pat wouldn't have made a theory about the games because they wouldn't exist, and neither would Super Horror Bro. So they wouldn't really know about the defects until they saw one. So if they didn't know and just started throwing their employees into the machine, how would they deal with the rejects? This is a moral dilemma, and I honestly don't know how Disney would handle it. The simple solution is just to put a bullet between their eyes, but if that got out, Disney would have to deal with a lot more than just getting cancelled. Plus, I don't know if they'd want to spend the money on the bullets. They absolutely would not let these versions run around the park terrorizing the kids, but maybe they'd keep them around for Halloween Horror Nights. Does Disney do that, or is it just Universal? Or Six Flags or whatever? Like, this is why Canada is great, because we have Wonderland and that's basically it. I don't count Cedar Park, but if you know, you know. But even if they did let them out during Halloween only, we see Imperfect Alice and even Sammy actively try and kill us. So we have no idea what unhappy, imperfect Disney characters would do during Halloween, where everyone thinks that people are just having fun or putting on a show. You'd see Captain Hook stab someone in the eye and they'd all think that it's just a show. Unless they figured out that these characters were homicidal maniacs beforehand, they would have one bloody night and then get shut down for the rest of forever. The question is, would they be liable for any lives taken or damages? It depends. If the court could prove that the ink machine was willingly used by Disney to create those monsters and then unleashed, then yes, they probably would be. But to prove that, the court would either need a willing subject to go through the machine, or they would have to try and make a pure ink monster, which could yield poor results, creating a searcher or even nothing. But a searcher could be enough to convince a jury. Then again, they could also just kill all the imperfect versions of the characters just because they weren't exactly what they wanted. And I mean, it's not like you can identify a cartoon character as a human, right? Maybe, I don't know, do they keep their fingerprints, their dental records? I don't know. But digging up the body of an imperfect Ariel after the company announced that they were going to have real versions of their characters at their park would be a real PR disaster, and would probably come with a full-blown investigation that would reveal what the hell they were doing, and then boom. Actually, this is kind of funny, since the financial mistake that probably ruined Joey Drew Studios was probably Bendyland, which I'm sure would have featured real-life versions of their most popular characters, and that might have been why he was testing the ink machine.
If something very similar to what we saw in the live-action version of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie came to our planet and was 100% without a doubt real, it would cause absolute mayhem. As humans, we believe that we are the superior species on this planet, and then this alien creature starts stealing running shoes from department stores and breaking the sound barrier? The military would not be having that. We could see two situations happening upon his discovery. Either one, we all come together as a planet to find Sonic, or it becomes a race for the first country to capture the hedgehog. Not just for the public's safety, but to study him as well. There's already been tons of conspiracy theories about Area 51 and their studying of alien and alien tech. Now imagine if they got a hold of real-life Sonic. Whatever country was able to harness his power, they would most likely use it to power their armed forces, which would probably lead them to make superhuman soldiers that could move at top speed, or even rocket boosters for getting even further into space than anyone else. If Sonic was real, then one would be right to assume that villains like Dr. Robotnik or a version of him would also exist. This could spell absolute terror for us normies working a 9-to-5 minding our own business. If an evil villain unleashed an army of robots to enslave the human race, it would be safe to assume that Sonic would be saying more than meow at that point. Sonic has saved the world several times, so it would only make sense that after this villain takes over, we would assist Sonic in taking him down to restore some balance to our everyday lives. Plus, I guess the public would just have to adjust to this alien running around knocking out robots and opening up portals with his warp rings. It'd make the walk to work a little bit more interesting, I'll tell you that. Another thing we should mention is that besides villains taking over the world and trying to battle it out with Sonic, there would be the introduction of the Chaos Emeralds as well, which are essentially the Infinity Stones of the Sonic universe. They hold great power and when all together can yield unimaginable power, the likes humans have never seen before. Especially if these Chaos Emeralds are scattered throughout the earth, it would begin an all new race to find them, making gold and diamonds a thing of the past. In the world of cell phone videos and 24/7 media that we live in, these emeralds would not be able to remain a secret for very long. It would then spur groups of individuals with both good and evil intentions to search for them, and if anyone besides Sonic finds them, well, you wouldn't want to see what happens next. This race for the Chaos Emeralds would just create even more heroes and villains battling it out on the planet, and thus even more things for Sonic the Hedgehog to do. Now, we can't talk about real Sonic without mentioning some of the really weird facts about hedgehogs in general. For starters, did you know that hedgehogs are actually illegal to keep as pets in Arizona, California, Georgia, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, New York City, and Washington DC? And if you live in Maine, you need a permit. That means if Sonic happened to show up in any of these states and you tried to help him out, you'd probably be charged. In California, you can be charged a civil fine of $500 to $10,000. Plus, they would make you pay for the animal's removal and storage. You can even be jailed for up to 6 months. Another weird thing about hedgehogs is that when exposed to a particularly pungent smell, they will do something called self-anointing, where they rub their frothy saliva all over their quills. Gross. So let's come back to the question of what if Sonic the Hedgehog is real? Well, he would most likely scare the daylights out of us humans, the army would try to study him, he'd bring villains and Chaos Emeralds, which would create more villains, but heroes as well. And if you tried to help Sonic out, you could get sent to jail, and if you haven't showered in a few days, he's probably going to spit up his own saliva and rub it all over his quills.
Well, first of all, let's get this out of the way instantly. If FNAF was real, it would be horrible. Just straight up. 5 kids would have gone missing in one of their locations and the company probably would have closed down. But let's assume that people would still end up going, whether it's because they didn't believe the lies or thought that the government made it up, or because it's their choice, or because they're a YouTuber who wants views. Why are you looking at me like that? Well, assuming that people still went to the restaurant because perhaps maybe they vanished around the area instead of inside the place, what would it be like to live in a real Five Nights at Freddy's? For a kid, it would be pretty awful, but you also wouldn't know it. The world would be dangerous and anyone could be William Afton's next victim, but you wouldn't know that there was a serial killer on the loose with murderous animatronics able to disguise themselves and hide in plain sight that are willing to kill at any moment. But I mean, like, to be fair, that's also like real life, minus the animatronics. For adults, if you have kids, you may be worried. I mean, any parent is always worried about their kids, but if there was a group of kids who went missing in your area, I'm sure that there would at least be a small amount of paranoia. And honestly, it would be reasonable. I mean, I grew up in a house where my father was always worried. So much so that my sister couldn't walk up to her friend's house up the street without him watching to make sure she was okay. And while that would probably be extreme for most parents, if there was a very real threat of kidnapping, I'm sure that there would be a lot of curfews. For the sake of this entire thing, we also have to assume that the police didn't investigate the interiors of the animatronics themselves, despite them smelling like death and leaking body fluids, including blood. Since that's something literally anyone with common sense would check when investigating the disappearance of children and then learning that animatronics are leaking blood and smelling like a dead body. But what of the technology that we see in these games? Would animatronics that can alter their appearance be realistic? No. Of course not. The spring-lock suits, the illusion discs, the twisted animatronics, and the like are all extremely improbable considering the actual technology of not only our time, but the 80s when this would have normally taken place. At least, if we have a rough idea of the timeline, which honestly at this point, we could be totally wrong about the timeline. The technology in the games is so highly advanced that we have absolutely no idea what else they could have access to. They could have smartphones in the 80s for crying out loud. And if they don't, then William should have capitalized on that rather than murdering countless innocent kids, because he could have literally been a billionaire. the highly advanced technology would have to be disregarded in terms of the abilities of William Afton. So while this seems like a fight that nobody could really win, realistically, it wouldn't be as bad as we think, at least in those terms, since even Chuck E. Cheese, the closest thing to Freddy Fazbear's in our world, obviously, still only has the most simple robotic abilities known to man, despite the popularity of Five Nights at Freddy's and their ability to capitalize on that trend by taking some of those concepts, like the advanced robotics, not the dead kids, and then converting them into real life, because like the concepts in the actual pizzeria, not having kids go missing, like I said, that's a bad idea. Although based on comments left on previous videos, especially about how a real life Freddy's would happen, there have been plenty of people that are willing to die, or more likely to go to Chuck E. Cheese if it was more dangerous for some reason. Y'all are weird. But one final query. How would YouTubers handle it? Clearly, there are YouTubers in this world thanks to the mention of MatPat, or at the very least Game Theory in the Fazbear Frights books, so what of the others? Well, we would most likely not be talking about FNAF, something that I'm sure a lot of you would enjoy, but also something that you wouldn't be aware of, which is a whole other can of worms that I won't be getting into today, because you wouldn't know about FNAF because FNAF wouldn't be a thing. However, I'm sure that there would be plenty of true crime and conspiracy YouTubers heading to a or the same Freddy Fazbear's where the kids went missing in order to solve the case, or really just talk about it and get nowhere with it. Sounds like someone I know. Since they don't have the clearance or the equipment to do an actual investigation, or on a potentially closed case. Shane Dawson would 100% have gone there for that same conspiracy theory video, and the psychic twins would definitely have showed up at some point and definitely sensed something, but not quite known what it was. Ooh. MatPat may have made a food theory video about it because he made a food theory video about Chuck E. Cheese, but the thing is, these YouTubers coming to investigate, would they be William's next targets? It's an interesting question because as far as we know, he's only killed one adult, and that was Henry. Every other victim has been a kid, so while they may be in more danger, there would clearly be a bigger issue in trying to deal with these YouTubers, especially if they get killed or die mysteriously shortly after visiting a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. It would probably start some form of curse rumor that would only get more people to go there to try to solve that case. But how would Freddy's have dealt with the pandemic? Would they have made enough to survive the years of quarantine? Or would they, like our Chuck E. Cheese, have to file for bankruptcy? Would they get to open their Pizzaplex? Or would some problematic tweets from William Afton rise and cause the restaurant to get cancelled for calling Chica a he? These are all good questions that we will never really have an answer for because, well, FNAF isn't real. And that's why people keep commenting that nothing in these videos is scary. No, it's not real. It can't actually hurt you. That's why it's not scary. Scary is subjective. Just relax.